Welcome to the NLP View with your host, Donna Blinston. Each week, Donna will explore how the techniques of NLP can help improve your personal and professional life. And now, here's your host, Donna Blinston.
Hello and welcome to the NLP View. My name is Donna Blinston. On today's show, we are going to discuss how you can use NLP to cope with the holiday season. There are a number of factors that can affect a person's perception of the holiday season. Unrealistic expectations, financial pressures, and too many commitments can cause stress at unrealistic levels. For some people, the holiday season is full of excitement, anticipation, and an urgency to plan and prepare. However, for some people, there is no excitement, no joy, and a distinct lack of enthusiasm. For some people, the holiday season itself brings an emotional roller coaster and a general depression. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, is an applied psychology that offers a series of tools and techniques that can help people overcome the holiday blues, completely transforming the individual's experience and memories to ensure the individual not only enjoys the holiday season, but is also in control. Negative emotions and limiting beliefs that have previously been formed through childhood, life events, or their own personal experience can mask the reality of what is happening. NLP provides tools that can remove that mask so that people can find a new set of resources to embrace the holidays. So I'd like to welcome to the show June Stoyer, where we'll discuss this further. Hello, June.
Hi, Donna. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to be back on your show.
I thank you. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. And
well, thank you. Well, I think when it comes to the holidays, I find that, especially amongst my colleagues and just family and friends, everybody has their points of saturation. It doesn't matter what the holiday is, whether it's Christmas, Valentine's Day, even for some people, Groundhog's Day. You have all sorts of different holidays that are, every month there's always something, whether it's National Donut Day to Mother's Day. There's just so many new holidays are popping up. And the thing is that even though most people view holidays as a day to celebrate a particular event or occasion, other people find it to be an opportunity for their memory to basically run wild and bring up all sorts of negative emotions and painful memories. It's something that can be very trying for many people.
It is, especially come the winter time when you've also got the environmental factors, the darker nights, the longer evenings, which for people who have had experiences like what you're explaining, or have had events, or it brings up particular memories for them, because of the evenings being so long and dark, they're home a lot earlier than they would be. They might not socialise as much, because the weather is generally colder, more rain. You tend to not go out as much as you would in the lighter months, which all of this adds to a person's perception of the holiday season, because they've got this mindset of the longness of the evenings, which is where the seasonal affective disorder, where that comes in, often known as the SAD disorder, or the winter blues.
Well, it's true. I mean, you think about this type of incapacitation, for the lack of a more clinical way of expressing it, as something that just affects people who live in perhaps Norway, Sweden, what have you, but it affects many people all over the world. And even here in the Northeast, it's amazing how many friends and colleagues will say, it's been so miserable outside, I wish the sun would come out, and the whole change in their attitude and their entire disposition when the sun is out, it's a world of difference.
I mean, medically, as we know, the sun provides us with the vitamin D. We absorb more vitamin C. We feel more energized. The warmth and the light that the sun brings, as well as the chemicals and minerals that it brings to us. It changes us in ourselves. You are brighter, and you'll often, if you're looking out of your window and it is, a beautiful summer's day, that will automatically lift your spirits however you got out of bed. But if you look out the window and you've got out of bed the wrong way, and then you look out to a rainy or cold or dark window, it's almost a snowball effect. Mm. You see what you want to see. And I think it is that people will see what they want to see, and they'll notice things that they want to notice dependent on their mood. Have you heard of the saying, rose-tinted glasses? Which tends to be referred to when somebody's in love and they don't see things often in the same way because they're masked with the rosy mist of love. Well, in that very same sense, you can always have a grey-tinted glasses where you don't see things the way they actually are because you've missed them with a negative emotion. So if you've got those dull-tinted glasses on and you're looking at something, you will miss other things that are there because of the things that you're looking for and the glasses that you're looking through.
Now, with your clients, Donna, when you're talking to people that are perhaps going through a really rough patch, whether it's a divorce or maybe there's a career change that was unexpected because of corporate layoffs, what have you, or even a natural disaster. I mean, the Northeast was hit with Hurricane Sandy, and unanticipated change is something that can also catapult people into depression. So what advice do you have for the audience as far as just being able to recognize, is this something that is a reaction because of a particular instance, or is it something that might be biological?
I guess it'd be around asking yourself, is this emotion here all the time? Or is there times during the day when I don't do this emotion, I don't do this behaviour? And if it's a case that they're doing it all the time, then you would generally say that it could be a depression or a negative emotional response that is having an additional negative impact on their every waking hour. Whereas if it's something that they are feeling, yet, come lunchtime when they go for lunch with their friends, that emotion is gone, then it's something different. So it's okay. What is it specifically that is upsetting you? And then we'd look into the specifics of what it is, and go around it in that way, I suppose. Very much being able to standing back from the emotion and looking at why it is that person is sad. Because sadness is an experience that is very unique to each individual, and it's interpreted and felt differently. And nobody can truly understand what that other person feels and means when they say they're sad without understanding what they mean by the word sad. In NLP, I was going to explain, in NLP, there's what's known as the map is not the territory. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the underlying principles of NLP. And it basically means that the words that somebody uses are just the words they've chosen to describe it. They're not actually the event or the item that they represent. So sadness for me could be something that's completely different to yourself, and something that I might get upset about. You might think, well, I don't understand why you're getting so upset, Donna. Why is that? Why are you reacting in this way? It's not such a big deal. Yet for me, it is a big deal. So it's understanding what exactly they mean and how they've described the event. Because often when we describe something, we describe it with our meanings and our words. And it's the emotions that we've attached to those words that construct the reality around it. Our language becomes the map of a territory that we've constructed, and it's through the information that we've obtained, through our senses, what we see, we hear, we feel, we smell, or even taste. It's through that we construct what's actually happened. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course. I mean, I see that with many friends and colleagues, whether it's at a performance where they hear a particular song and the person will just start crying because of a particular melody. Or I've seen people at different functions where they'll see something, whether it's a particular dish or something that's being served that happens to be unique and, not something that's common, but something that's more of a special occasion type thing. And all of a sudden they'll start talking about a particular childhood memory and then get very emotional because you can see that it's triggering a memory about a family member or friend and is really bringing back some very sensitive feelings. So, yeah, it's just very interesting that all the different senses can trigger these types of responses. Now, having said that, you just explained how to recognize that in yourself, and you did allude to recognizing it in people in general, but can you specifically explain to our audience how they can recognize when, say, a family member or someone that they care for is reacting emotionally to something, and it's an emotional thing as opposed to just being in a bad mood for whatever reason. For example, I have a friend, without fail, every Christmas season, and he refers to it as the silly season, and I understand why. He just gets very depressed for no reason, and it's almost as if from the minute that the Christmas season begins to New Year's, he's just very emotional, and you almost have to walk on pins and needles when you have conversations with this particular person because he's so sensitive. Even though he won't admit it, he's just very sensitive. So for me, it took me a while to understand that this was, the routine for him, because I had never had any friends that were like that. But, when you work with the public and you start interacting with so many different personalities and whatnot, you begin to understand when someone is actually going through an emotional period, if you will. So can you explain to our audience what some of the symptoms are or what some of the signs are for recognizing the this emotional type reaction that is triggered by a particular holiday?
Yes, there's a couple of answers here. One, it could be to recognise the behaviours that they're presenting. So for some people, they might be overly stressed or more irritable, more snappy. They might be more generally fatigued, tiredness, or just that lack of energy or that lack of enthusiasm towards things. Some people become quite dissociated. They don't want to get involved, and they don't respond to, even though they're physically present in whatever situation is happening. They're not involved. They are dissociated. They're not engaging in what's happening, and because of that, it's almost like they're trying to close it off and pretend they're not there, so they don't have to deal with it. And it could be because of many things. For some people, this time of the year, it brings back memories of lost loved ones or friends. It could be because they're genuinely lonely. It might be that come the holiday seasons, when they're thinking about their families or if they are alone, whether it's through loss or because they're single, it might be that they're feeling almost uncomfortable being in situations where there's other couples and families because it makes them recognise what they haven't got. So it could be an acknowledgement for that. So if somebody is single, for example, or hasn't got children and you're aware that they're wanting them, bringing them into that big social family and couples situation might make it quite difficult for them. For other people, it's great, and that's exactly what they need. They need to be out. They need to be socialising. But for some, it's looking at where they're at. It is, and it's not. You know, if you are, it's the old saying. You know, choose company, three's a crowd. Well, it's the same as there's five. If there's two couples and there's a fifth person that's on their own, it can be uncomfortable. So it's an acknowledgement of where they're at and what's happening, and just checking out if it's okay for them, or whether they'd want, or maybe adjusting their behaviour as a couple during that night, so they're very much with the three of them rather than it being the couple and the other person. There could be a lot of financial stress that's happening. Especially Christmas, it's predominantly expensive. Your holiday season as a whole, there's more nights out, there's more, everything tends to go up. It's colder, you're having more heating, more home bills, domestic bills. There's multiple financial stresses, so it's acknowledging and having a look into that. And for some people, there's a lot of unrealistic expectations that maybe they put on themselves, or that are put on them by other people, because they're the party animal, or the one that always organises it, the one that always does the big buffet. And sometimes it's a case of, is it okay for you to do this? Do you want us to help you? And it's that, is a person being taken for granted possibly, or have we not checked out that it's okay for the other person? So those are some things for the person to keep in the mind with regards to it. And the other part of the question, sorry June, I'm going around the houses really, but it's also acknowledgement of the seasonal disorder that I mentioned earlier. Many people do feel depressed around the winter holidays due to the condition called seasonal affective disorder, often known as SAD, or seasonal depression. And it's a form of depression that tends to occur as the days grow shorter and the nights grow longer. And the winter brings a decrease in the amount of sunlight, colder temperatures, which brings on that depression. So some of the signs that you'll see with that are your tiredness, fatigue, the depression, low in mood, crying spells, and a general mood swings, almost like hormonal mood swings. Again, that irritability because of the tiredness and because of the mood swings. Some people have a lot of physical symptoms. They feel more achy, generally, whether it's a bony ache or a muscular ache, often because a lot of people will eat more in the winter, more stodgy foods because of it being colder. And if they generally have a lighter diet, or maybe have a wheat intolerance that's not been recognised, or things like that, as their diet's changing as they're growing older, and then other medical complications like your diabetes, your cardiac impacts, those things can have effect on a person's dietary and endocrine system. Some people have a loss of sex drive, insomnia, general decreased activity level, and it's the overeating tends to be a big thing, which brings a lot of psychology along with it itself, body image and weight gain, and there's that mix, oh, it's Christmas, I'll eat everything, and then in the back of your head there's that little voice that's saying you don't actually need to have that little piece of cake.
Now, having said that, when you know that the particular holiday is affecting you, and say if you are at some event or family gathering, et cetera, and you feel the emotions just taking over. For example, if you're, I'm just saying, at a church and you happen to hear Christmas music, and you're surrounded by people, what have you, and you can just feel yourself becoming very emotionally affected by the music, which it happens to many people. But you don't want to necessarily let it all loose, so to speak.
Yep.
Or another example is, say if you're at, I don't know, you're out at a dinner party, and especially if you've suffered a loss, or if you're someone who's perhaps looking to conceive and having a difficult time with that, and all of a sudden, there's a child that just, brings out a particular emotion in you. I could go on with the examples, but do you have a particular technique that you can share with the audience as far as what they can do once they recognize that, okay, the emotion has been triggered, I can feel myself getting really upset? Is there something that you can do to either clear your mind or just kind of control the emotion before you just completely break down altogether?
Yes, there is. There's many things. I think for our listeners, there's two main things. The one which would cover the range of different examples that you gave them there, June, is called an anchoring technique, where you anchor a positive state. So for the person, for example, who knows that going into church and hearing the Christmas songs will elicit a sadness, it'll be a technique where they could prior to going to the church, or prior to being in environments where they'd hear that Christmas music, would be to install a positive anchor, which that they can then fire when they need to. And it's almost like an internal switch that they turn on. And to set up an anchor, you basically think of a time when they felt the different state. So for this, let's call him a gentleman who's in church and he's heard the Christmas music. If he starts to feel sad, where instead he wants to feel maybe happy or calm or relaxed, or whatever state it is. So let's say that he wants to feel happy rather than sad. Then prior to going in, you'd set up this anchor by getting yourself to think back to a time when you previously felt really happy. And it's not just a happy because, I don't know, you got a free magazine in your newspaper.
It's got to be a really strong emotion, right?
It has. It's got to be enough of a happiness that makes you want to laugh, that brings those warm feelings, puts a smile on your face. Because an anchor is just a stimulus response. If you were to think about your nieces or your nephews, or for our audience, their children, or the pets, or an activity in the past, that whenever they think of it, immediately that smile comes back to the face. It's that kind of emotion they're wanting to capture. So he'd be going back to a time when he felt that, and he'd want him to see what he saw, hear what he heard, and really feel those feelings of feeling completely happy. And it might not be easy the first time, but by the second, third, fourth, or fifth time that you're doing it, you'll be able to get into that state very effectively. So that is the state bit that you want him to go back to. And the applying the anchor is literally a point on your body that you'd be able to do in public. So example would be to press your thumb and your forefinger together. For some, it might be squeezing a ring on the hand or squeezing the earlobe, something that's replicable, but it's not something that they'd
that's obvious.
Handshake. Yeah, that's obvious. You'll see it. It'll be seen a lot in the Olympics this year. A lot, possibly all the Olympians, where they'd have some movement that they do before they went and did the race or before they went and did the run that was just a bit out of sequence, but that was their anchor to get them into that calm, cool, relaxed or focused state, or whatever it is that their coach has anchored them to. So if you're having your fingers together, you go back to that time, and as soon as you start to feel those emotions of feeling really happy starting to bubble up, and you can see yourself back in that event, you can hear what you were hearing, what people were saying to you, what you were saying to yourself. Those feelings are getting more intense. you'd fire your anchor, and what I mean by that is you press your fingers together. You keep holding it and holding it as that intensity is getting more and more and more, and as soon as it starts to wane and become less, you'd release your anchor. And you do that again and again and again on the same point with different examples, or the same one if needed, so that whenever you need it, you'd be able to squeeze your finger and thumb together and get back that feeling of feeling that happiness. So when he is in the church and he's starting to feel those sad feelings, he can use his anchor to literally flick the switch and transform that feeling into a happy feeling. Because, long term, it'd be going home and, okay, what is it that's happening? Why am I getting upset? Do I need to go and speak to somebody? And it'd be questions for yourself to discover why it is and to look to sort it out for yourself. But for in that moment, when you're out, you can't do that. So that's when you need to be able to use something like an anchor to resolve it. An anchor, it's a stimulus response. Have you heard of Pavlov's dogs?
Of course.
Pavlov's dog, it's a conditioned response. Something happens, and because of that something, a stimulus. Just the same way as the smell of fresh ground coffee, or of fresh bread being made, or for the bell at school with break. As soon as it rings, you immediately, it's like, right, okay, I'm up. And whatever you were doing before, you flick and you're off out of that school door. Or for everybody now, that the time of year that we're on, it'll be that getting ready to go leave the office for the holiday season for them. It's that they're all conditioned responses. Just the same way, a traffic light is a visual response. As soon as you see it go from green to amber, you start to slow down. And that's what you'd want to be using so that you'd be able to flip that switch for yourself.
Now, it's interesting. You go over many different techniques in your book, Psychobabble, and it's very interesting that there is, or it seems as though there's a lot of attention that's paid to the negative behavior. And what I admire about the work that you do as you teach NLP to your students is that you spend quite a bit of time enforcing positive behavior reinforcement. And it's interesting as a society how we perceive negativity, what it should be, and we're just very quick to embrace it. But when it comes to positive reinforcement, we don't give it much merit, much value. We kind of brush it off. And the anchoring technique, which you just described, it was something that I also observed with the Olympians and have also learned, throughout my entire career in different ways. But it was never, it was just more like, oh, this is what this sales training course teaches you. But they don't necessarily get as detailed into the actual reason why and how you should do it for it to be truly effective, and so that you can continue to utilize it throughout your life in other areas and adjust it so that it can be used for a multitude of different emotional reactions, what have you. And I think especially if you're attending public events or whatever the case may be, it's one thing to be able to express your emotions, but for some people it is a problem. I've seen people that will break down for no particular reason, and everywhere that they go, that's just how they are. And it's not that I'm being insensitive. I am very open to people being able to share their feelings, but especially if you're at different functions, you have to maintain a certain amount of control over your emotions. Otherwise, it gives the impression that you're not altogether stable. And especially if you're at work, work is one place where it's not acceptable to be overly emotional all the time. It could mean termination for some people, especially if they have to be very focused and very serious about whatever the case may be. For example, especially in your field, Donna, working at the hospital, if you have a physician that is emotionally breaking down constantly, it's going to affect that physician. Yeah, it's going to affect that physician's ability and also the reputation.
Yeah.
You know, my next question for you is in regards to, I guess, some coping techniques in addition to the grounding technique that you just shared with the audience. But do you have any other type of a coping technique as far as, for example, if you're around people that are unpleasant, and, for example, say if you're around relatives that you don't like, and whether it's an anniversary, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, it doesn't matter what it is, it's a particular family gathering, and you're trying to be as grounded as possible, you're trying to get into whatever the mood is and maintain a positive disposition and, just try to maintain a sense of calm. And then all of a sudden you're bombarded by a particular family member or even a friend of the family that just says something to you unexpected. What do you recommend that the audience can do in order to counteract that sudden, unanticipated, almost like an emotional assault, if you will, a verbal assault? I mean, I've seen this happen so many times throughout my life where I will be at an event and I'll see two people just, one person's trying to be calm and maybe it's a couple going through a divorce and the mother-in-law comes over and puts her 2 cents in. Or you see the father-in-law just basically go to town on the son-in-law or something of that nature. And it's like, okay, this is uncomfortable. But, if the person that's dealing with it, especially if they're trying to remain calm, it's not very easy to just shrug it off.
Yes, and that it does happen, especially when alcohol is added to the equation and other family tensions that potentially could happen. And there's numerous techniques, and I guess it depends on what your intention is from what's happening. If it's a relative that that you don't particularly like, or you always clash with from a personality perspective, one technique is called perceptual positions, where you basically look at things from the other person's perspective. Because often when somebody says something, especially if it's out of a left field comment, often it can seem left field to you because what you've said to you makes complete sense, whereas to the other person it doesn't. So sometimes it's a case of stepping back and saying to yourself, okay, so what has to have happened for that person to respond in that way? And by that, you're second positioning yourself. You're trying to step into their world. What is it that they must have heard or they must have understood for them to have said what they've said? So that's one way of looking at it. You could also use the same technique prior to meeting with them. And you don't like Uncle Bob, for example. So prior to going in, you literally have a triangle on the floor, and you'd stand in what we'll call position 1, each point of the triangle being 1, 2, and 3. So you'd stand in position 1, looking over to position 2, where you can see Bob. And you'd say to Bob exactly what you felt. So all the times he's annoyed you, or he's done something in the family, said something, the way he acts, behaves, eats, whatever it is that irritates you about him. as you're looking over to Bob, who stood there in position 2. And the more you put into this, the more you'll get out of it. Once you've done that, you take it off and go over and become Bob. So you'd stand there as Uncle Bob, and if he is one of those characters, he would have his hands on his hip or slumped over, or however he would stand. You'd stand the way he would. I want you to get into character and be Uncle Bob. And while you stood there, as Uncle Bob, you've just listened to, if I use you, June, you just listened to June saying all that she's just said to Uncle Bob. And you want to find out how must Bob be feeling, knowing that is how June in position 1 feels about him. How is Bob feeling as he looks over towards June? What does he want to say? What annoys him about June? What little things does June do that get on his nerves? All those kind of questions. And yes, for our audience who are wondering, well, how on earth do you know what Bob thinks? You were right, in one sense, as far as you'll never truly know what Bob is thinking about June. But on the same note, if you perceive somebody in a certain way, you will only see those things within that person. And part of this technique is we're removing those perceptions of the other person, so we just see it as it is rather than as we're seeing it. So if you can step into that other person's world and acknowledge ways that you might be behaving towards him that's annoying him, then you're going to start to change your own behaviour, and by you changing yourself, you'll automatically change how the other person interacts with you. So it's very much about changing your own behaviour, because you can't change another person unless they want to change. But automatically, if you change yourself, they will change towards you. So once you've been there and you've been in position 2 as Bob, you take that off and you go into position 3. And in position 3, I like to think of it as a wise old owl, sat up in the tree looking down at June in position 1 and Bob in position 2. And from this position, you're dissociated from the situation, the event of what's happened in the past. What is it that you've noticed between the relationship between June and Bob? And you want to keep dissociated language where you're referring to the people in each different part, because by doing that, you're going to get more out of it. You don't want to be yourself. You want to give advice. And it comes back to that old thing of anybody can give you advice, but they don't really know what's happening for you. Whereas if you can give yourself advice, that's a bit harder to ignore. Or at least if you do ignore it and you carry on, you know how ways that you could resolve it, and you're choosing not to. So it's your problem that you're keeping, and that's where it starts to change. So what is it you notice in the relationship? What is it that June could do to improve the relationship? What is it June could say? All those different things that you'd observe from being the wise old owl. And it could be, if wise old owl wasn't something that's natural to you, it could be a family member or a friend or somebody that you'd look up to for advice. And what is it that they'd say? What advice would they give the June and Bob down there? Once you've done that, you go back to position 1 with all those new learnings and insights, and then look at Bob through the new eyes, the wiser eyes, and look at the situation. And by doing that, you'll have a more informed view, a different perspective. You'll have learned a lot about yourself and about Bob, so that when you then go to that family gathering with Uncle Bob, who's doing whatever Uncle Bob always does, your perception of him will have changed. So your attitude, the way you respond to him, the amount of effort or time you take in conversations will have changed. And because that changes and improves, the dynamic between you and the relationship improves. And I think from a self-improvement and a self-development point of view, that's probably one of the best techniques for individuals wanting to cope with known problems that they're going to have to face because of the holiday season.
And I think once you understand where someone is coming from, and especially maybe some of the issues that they are dealing with, and you're able to just kind of step in their shoes virtually, so to speak, and understand what the benefit of their nasty comments will be, or what the source is for that pain. I mean, people are, in general, don't just lash out for no reason. There's a pain that's there that is triggering some emotion that's deeper that really has nothing to do with you. It's just you're pushing a button in them. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about NLP and the work that you do, Donna. You really enable people to understand what these problems are and what the core issue really is, and explore the different sides of that. Donna, can you share with our audience the upcoming workshops that you have? Because I think a lot of people would be very interested in just getting a little bit more firsthand experience with your NLP workshops as well as your new Pocket Guide series.
Yes, I'm looking to do several workshops come 2013. The first one will be in March, when dates will be up on the website, donnablinston.com, and also through yourself, June, at the Organic View radio show, where I'll be looking at doing almost like a format of an introduction to NLP, and it'll be very much around ways of coping, and the way that I will conduct the online course and the webinars will be around coping with career, relationships, and how we can apply the different techniques within different contexts. So we'll be looking at anchoring, we'll be looking at the perceptual positions that I've discussed tonight, and how you can apply those techniques to get a better understanding of where you're at and improve your relationship with other people, whichever way that may be, whether it's personal or professional. I'll also do webinar directly with regards to relationships, and also look at interferes and phobias, starting in March, and then it'll be every month through till about November is where I'm looking at the moment of people that have already signed up. And the way you can sign up is through the newsletter. If you go through theorganicview.com, you'll be able to sign up for our newsletter, which will give you all the information about the up-and-coming shows, our guests that will be coming on the shows, the different topics that we'll be looking at and covering, and all future events.
Excellent. I know many people have been asking about the workshops as well as the Pocket Guide series, which I think is just such a blessing. So many people have been talking about not only the work that you do, Donna, but all the insight and just knowledge that they've gained from the different interviews that you've done, and you've just been doing such a remarkable job.
Thank you, June. Thank you. For me, it's an honour. It's a pleasure. I love NLP. I get so much out of it personally. And, well, I guess I want to thank you, June, for joining me today, and also thanking all of our listeners. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about NLP, then tune in each week, and also visit my website, www.donnablinston.com, where you can pick up a copy of my best-selling book, Psychobabble, a straightforward, plain English guide to the benefits of NLP. You'll also be able to find out about the online webinars, links to the podcast of the previous shows, sign up for the newsletters, and find out about the Pocket Guides, which will be on tips of how we can use NLP to clear your mind, cope with the holiday season, tips for career advancement and development, and relationships. And once again, June, thank you very much, and thank you for our audience.
Thanks, Donna.